The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Wealth hung in the air like perfume. Business elites, celebrities, politicians, and heirs moved through the room in designer gowns and tailored suits. At the center stood Kwesi Mensah, Africa's most influential hotel investor. Tonight was his 60th birthday. His daughter stood beside him, Nia Mensah. Elegant, quiet, graceful. The woman everyone underestimated, especially her husband, Kang Min-jun, one of Seoul's youngest billionaire CEOs. Broad shoulders, sharp features, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal intricate tattoos winding along his forearms. The marriage had shocked everyone 2 years ago. Nobody knew the truth, not even Nia. Min-jun had never married for love. He had married for revenge. A business misunderstanding years earlier had cost his father millions. The blame had fallen on the Mensah family, and Min-jun never forgot, never forgave. The MC raised a glass. To family. Applause echoed. Then someone joked from a nearby table. Min-jun married well. Laughter followed. The CEO smirked, then he said it, loud enough for half the room to hear. Let's be honest. The ballroom quieted. His eyes landed on Nia. Cold, dismissive, cruel. If her father wasn't rich, she wouldn't have looked twice at me. A few nervous laughs. Nia froze. The smile disappeared from her face. Min-jun wasn't done. Most gold diggers are subtle. More laughter. Mine skipped that step. Silence crashed across the room. Her father's jaw tightened. Her mother's eyes widened. But Nia said nothing. For 2 years, she had endured emotional neglect, cold dinners, separate bedrooms, public indifference. This humiliation simply happened to have witnesses. Min-jun lifted his champagne glass, completely unaware. Tonight would change everything, because across the ballroom doors, a lawyer had just arrived, and he was carrying a thick envelope with Naya's name on it. The silence lingered long after Min-jun's words faded. Nia stood perfectly still, not because she was weak, because she refused to break in front of people who wanted to watch her fall. The ballroom lights suddenly felt too bright. Every eye seemed fixed on her, waiting, judging, enjoying the spectacle. Min-jun casually took another sip of champagne, as if he hadn't just humiliated his wife in front of hundreds of guests. Then the ballroom doors opened. A man in a navy suit stepped inside, calm, professional, purposeful. His gaze found Nia immediately. Nia. The room turned. The lawyer crossed the floor carrying a leather folder. Whispers spread among the guests. Min-jun frowned. What is this? The lawyer stopped beside Nia. His expression remained neutral. You asked me to bring them personally. The words landed like thunder. Min-jun's smile disappeared. Nia slowly accepted the folder. For the first time all evening, she looked directly at her husband. There was no anger in her eyes, no tears. That somehow made it worse. What is that? Min-jun asked. She opened the folder, removed a stack of papers, then handed them to him. The room held its breath. Min-jun glanced down. His pulse immediately spiked. Divorce agreement. For a second, he thought he was reading it wrong. Then he looked up. Nia's voice remained calm, almost gentle. I prepared them 6 months ago. A shocked murmur swept through the ballroom. 6 months? His confidence cracked. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. The words hit harder than any public argument could have, because there was no emotion behind them, only certainty. Nia turned toward the guests. I apologize for disrupting the celebration. Then she faced her father. I'm leaving. Kwesi immediately stepped forward, without hesitation, without questions, without conditions. He simply offered his arm. And for the first time in years, someone chose her publicly. Naya accepted. The crowd parted. Min-jun watched his wife walk away. The same woman he had ignored for 2 years, the same woman he believed would never leave. And for the first time, fear settled deep inside his chest, because something told him she wasn't bluffing. And if she walked out tonight, he might never get her back. The penthouse felt different after Nia left. Too quiet, too large, too empty. For 2 years, Min-jun had barely noticed her presence. Now he noticed her absence everywhere. The untouched teacup beside the balcony window, the books neatly arranged on a shelf, the fresh flowers she replaced every week, small things. Things he had never appreciated, things that suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Min-jun loosened his tie and stared at the divorce papers spread across his desk. He had read them 6 times. The words never changed. Naya wanted nothing. No alimony, no property, no shares, no settlement. Nothing. His jaw tightened. That wasn't how gold diggers behaved. The realization irritated him more than it should have. His phone buzzed. His mother. You embarrassed yourself tonight. Minjun frowned. I embarrassed myself? You called your wife a gold digger. His mother's voice was sharp. Then she walked away without asking for a single one. Silence. His mother continued. Do you know what people are saying? He didn't answer, because he already knew. The story was spreading across Seoul's elite circles. Not that Nia was greedy, but that Minjun had spent 2 years mistreating a woman who never wanted his money. For the first time, the public sympathy belonged entirely to her. After ending the call, he poured himself a drink, but before he could take a sip, his assistant called. Sir, there's something you should see. Minutes later, photos appeared on his tablet, Nia, at a luxury hotel rooftop restaurant. The next image made his stomach tighten. She wasn't alone. A man sat across from her, tall, confident, well-dressed. His hand rested casually on the table as he smiled at her, and Nia smiled back. Not the polite smile she used at business events. A real one, warm, comfortable, alive. Minjun stared at the image far longer than necessary. Who is he? His assistant hesitated, then answered, Daniel Thompson. A successful international attorney, one of the most respected men in the city. Minjun's grip tightened around the tablet. For reasons he didn't understand, the sight of another man making Nia smile bothered him far more than the divorce papers ever had. Minjun told himself he didn't care. He repeated it during meetings, during conference calls, during sleepless nights staring at the ceiling of an empty penthouse. But the lie was becoming harder to believe. 3 days after the birthday gala, he found himself standing outside a luxury hotel overlooking the Han River. Not because he planned to see Nia. At least that's what he told himself. The restaurant occupied the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking view of Seoul. And unfortunately for Minjun, Nia was there, with Daniel. The moment he saw her, something twisted inside his chest. She looked different. Not because of her clothes, not because of her makeup, because she looked lighter. The exhaustion that had shadowed her for years seemed gone. Daniel was saying something. Nia laughed. The sound carried faintly through the open terrace doors. Minjun couldn't remember the last time he'd heard her laugh like that. The realization unsettled him. Inside the restaurant, Daniel leaned back in his chair. You seem happier. Nia smiled. I feel peaceful. That's different. It is. She glanced toward the river. For the first time in a long time, I'm not waiting for someone to choose me. Daniel studied her quietly, then nodded, as if he understood more than she said. Across the room, Minjun's jaw tightened. He hated how comfortable they looked together, how naturally Daniel listened, how easily Nia smiled. The waiter arrived with dessert. Daniel thanked him, then slid the better-looking plate toward Nia without thinking. A tiny gesture, meaningless. Yet Minjun noticed it immediately, because he had never done things like that. Not once, not in 2 years. The thought followed him long after he left the hotel. That evening, another surprise waited for him. His grandmother had requested a family dinner, attendance mandatory. Minjun arrived expecting business discussions. Instead, his grandmother placed a newspaper clipping on the table, a photo of Nia, leading a major charitable housing initiative. The headline praised her leadership. His grandmother looked directly at him, then asked a question that left the entire room silent. Why is everyone else seeing your wife's value before you ever did? The question followed Minjun for days. Why is everyone else seeing your wife's value before you ever did? His grandmother's words echoed through every meeting, every quiet moment, every sleepless night. And for the first time, he didn't have an answer. The truth was uncomfortable, because he had spent 2 years looking at Nia through the lens of an old grudge, a grudge she had never created, a debt she had never owed, yet she had paid for it every day, with silence, with loneliness, with dignity. Meanwhile, Nia was rebuilding her life. The charitable housing initiative quickly attracted national attention. Investors wanted meetings, media outlets requested interviews, sponsors lined up to support her projects. For years, she had worked behind the scenes. Now she was finally stepping into the spotlight, and she looked like she belonged there. One afternoon, she arrived at a luxury hotel conference center for a fundraising event. The ballroom buzzed with excitement. Business leaders filled the room. So did reporters. Nia adjusted the sleeve of her cream-colored blazer and took a slow breath. She still wasn't used to all the attention. You'll get there. Daniel appeared beside her, carrying 2 coffees. His familiar smile immediately eased her nerves. Am I that obvious? A little. She laughed softly. Daniel handed her a cup. You know what I admire most about you? Nia raised an eyebrow. What? You never became bitter. For a moment, she looked away, because there had been nights when bitterness felt easier, nights when the rejection hurt enough to change her, but she had survived them, without losing herself. Thank you, she said quietly. Daniel's expression softened. You deserve every good thing that's happening. Across the ballroom entrance, another man had just arrived. Min Jun. His gaze immediately found them. Found Daniel. Found Nia smiling. And once again, that unfamiliar feeling tightened inside his chest. Jealousy. Real. Sharp. Impossible to ignore. Then he watched Daniel gently place a reassuring hand against Nia's shoulder. The gesture lasted only seconds, but it was enough. For the first time in his life, Kang Min-jun felt threatened. Min-jun remained near the ballroom entrance long after he should have left. The fundraising event continued around him. Investors talked. Reporters moved between tables. Champagne glasses clinked beneath crystal chandeliers. Yet all he could focus on was Nia and Daniel. The attorney seemed to appear everywhere lately, always nearby, always smiling at her, always making her laugh. Minjun hated how much that bothered him. He hated it even more because he finally understood why. For 2 years, Nia had belonged to his world, even if he had never truly welcomed her into it. Now she was building a life that no longer revolved around him. And he wasn't handling it well. At the center of the ballroom, Nia stepped onto the stage. The room immediately quieted. She stood behind the podium, confident, elegant, composed. Minjun found himself staring, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she looked powerful, like someone who had finally remembered her worth. Every family deserves a safe place to call home, Nia began. Her voice was calm, strong, authentic. The audience listened carefully. Some even took notes. By the time she finished speaking, the room erupted into its applause. Several investors rose to their feet, a standing ovation. For her. Minjun watched the moment unfold. Pride unexpectedly stirred inside him. Then came the announcement. One of the sponsors stepped forward. We are pleased to announce a $10 million partnership with the Nia Foundation. The ballroom exploded with excitement. Cameras flashed, reporters rushed forward. Nia looked genuinely shocked. Daniel smiled beside her. Then he pulled her into a brief congratulatory hug. The crowd cheered again. Something dark flashed through Minjun's chest. Not anger, fear. Because Daniel wasn't just supporting her, he was becoming important to her. And for the first time, Minjun realized something terrifying. If he lost Nia now, it wouldn't be because of revenge. It wouldn't be because of pride. It would be because another man had given her something he never had: respect. As the applause continued, Nia looked across the ballroom. For a brief second, her eyes met Minjun's. And instead of pain, she looked completely indifferent. That hurt far more than the divorce papers ever had. Indifference. That was the expression Nia gave him before turning away. Not anger, not sadness, not disappointment. Nothing. And somehow, that hurt more than every argument they had never had. For years, Minjun had assumed Nia would always be there, waiting, hoping, trying. Now she looked at him the same way she looked at strangers in a crowd. The realization followed him home. 3 nights later, his grandmother invited him to her estate outside Seoul. The old woman rarely repeated herself. When she requested his presence, people listened. Minjun found her sitting in the garden beneath flowering trees. She poured tea into 2 cups, then looked at him over the rim of her glasses. You love her? Minjun nearly laughed. No. The older woman raised an eyebrow. Then why do you look miserable every time her name comes up? He said nothing, because he didn't have an answer. His grandmother sighed. You punished the wrong person. The words landed heavily. You married a woman who had done nothing to you. Silence. You wanted revenge so badly that you never noticed who she actually was. For once, Minjun couldn't argue, because deep down he knew she was right. Meanwhile, Nia's world continued expanding. The foundation's success attracted international attention. That week, she flew to Busan for a major housing summit. Daniel accompanied her as legal advisor. The event took place inside a luxury beachfront resort. Ocean waves rolled against the shore beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. After a successful presentation, investors surrounded Nia with congratulations. She smiled graciously. But as the crowd dispersed, Daniel hesitated. Nia, She turned. His expression had changed. More serious, more vulnerable. What is it? Daniel took a slow breath. I need to tell you something. Before he could continue, his phone rang. The interruption frustrated him. Nia noticed immediately. You can tell me later. Daniel nodded reluctantly, but the look in his eyes lingered, and for the first time Nia wondered if his feelings for her ran deeper than friendship. Miles away in Seoul, Minjun received photos from the summit, photos of Nia and Daniel together, standing close, smiling, comfortable. His chest tightened. Then his assistant delivered unexpected news. Sir, Daniel Thompson is preparing to leave the country. Minjun looked up sharply. Why? The answer came seconds later, and it changed everything. Minjun stared at his assistant. Why is Daniel leaving the country? The assistant shifted uneasily. He received an offer to lead an international legal division in London. Silence. Then came the second part. He intends to ask Naya to go with him. The words hit harder than Minjun expected. For several seconds, he simply sat there, motionless, because suddenly the future he feared felt real. Naya wouldn't just divorce him. She would leave. Completely. Build a new life. A better one. A life where he no longer existed. That night, Minjun couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, he opened a box he had ignored since his wedding. Inside were photographs, letters, small gifts, memories Naya had carefully preserved, a photo from their honeymoon, a handwritten note wishing him success before an important merger. A birthday gift he had never opened. His chest tightened. She had spent years loving a version of him that barely existed, and he had rewarded that love with coldness. The next morning, he booked a flight to Busan. Meanwhile, Nia stood on a private terrace overlooking the ocean. The summit had ended. Most guests had already left. The evening sky glowed gold above the water. Daniel joined her. His expression was unusually serious. Nia. She turned. I almost didn't say this. His voice softened, but if I leave without telling you, I'll regret it. Nia's heart began to pound. Daniel smiled sadly. I love you. The words hung between them, gentle, honest, unexpected, not demanding, not possessive, simply true. Nia looked away toward the ocean, overwhelmed. Daniel stepped closer. I don't need an answer tonight. Before she could respond, another voice interrupted. Nia. Both turned. Minjun stood at the entrance of the terrace. Wind moved through his dark hair, his tattooed forearms visible beneath rolled sleeves. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes. Only desperation. Only regret. Only a man realizing he was running out of time, and judging by the look on Daniel's face, he wasn't the only one willing to fight for her anymore. The ocean breeze swept across the terrace. For a moment, nobody spoke. Naya stood between the two men. One represented the future. The other represented a past that refused to stay buried. Daniel remained calm. Minjun looked anything but. The Korean billionaire's gaze never left Nia, as though he were afraid she might disappear if he blinked. Daniel finally broke the silence. I'll give you two a moment. Nia immediately shook her head. No. Both men looked at her. Her voice remained steady. If anything needs to be said, it can be said openly. For years, she had endured private pain. She wasn't interested in private games anymore. Daniel nodded respectfully. Minjun swallowed hard. For perhaps the first time in his life, he looked nervous. Nia. His voice cracked slightly. The sound surprised all three of them, including him. She folded her arms, waiting. Minjun took a slow breath. I was wrong. The words felt foreign, coming from a man who rarely apologized. I blamed you for something that was never your fault. Naya's expression didn't change, so he continued. I punished you for a mistake you didn't make. Silence. I convinced myself I was getting revenge. His eyes lowered briefly. But all I did was hurt someone who cared about me. The confession hung in the air, raw, honest, painfully overdue. For the first time, Daniel looked at Minjun differently. Not as a rival, but as a man finally confronting his own failures. Naya stared at the ocean. The waves crashed softly below. Then she asked the question that mattered. Why now? Minjun's answer came immediately. Because it was the truth. Because I finally realized what my life looks like without you. The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. You weren't supposed to leave. A sad smile touched her lips. There it is. His brow furrowed. There what is? The problem. She looked directly at him. For 2 years, you never fought to keep me. Her eyes glistened. But the moment someone else saw my value, suddenly you could. The words struck harder than any accusation, because they were true. And for the first time, Minjun had no defense. The terrace fell silent. Naya's words lingered between them. For 2 years, you never fought to keep me. The truth settled heavily over the ocean breeze. Minjun lowered his gaze. For most of his life, he had always known what to say, how to negotiate, how to persuade, how to win. But standing in front of Naya, he realized none of those skills mattered. Because this wasn't a business deal. This was a heart he had broken. And hearts didn't respond to contract when he stepped back, giving them space. Not because he was surrendering, because he respected her enough to let her choose freely, Minjun noticed. And strangely, that made him respect Daniel too. Nia, he said softly. She looked at him. For the first time, there were no walls in his expression. No pride, no revenge, no arrogance, only honesty. I don't deserve another chance. She remained silent, but I want one anyway. The confession came without calculation, without strategy, without guarantees. I loved you far too late. Naya's eyes widened slightly. Minjun took a step closer, not enough to pressure her, just enough to be heard. I noticed every place you left empty after you walked away. His voice grew quieter. I noticed every silence, every untouched room, every missing smile, every morning you weren't there. Emotion tightened his throat. You were the best thing in my life, and I didn't see it until I lost you. For a moment, neither moved. Then Nia exhaled slowly. Months ago, those words would have healed everything. Now they simply felt honest. Nothing more, nothing less. She looked toward Daniel, then back at Minjun, and finally she smiled, not because she had chosen either man, but because she had finally chosen herself. The divorce was finalized weeks later. The headlines exploded across Korea's business world. Yet the biggest surprise came months afterward. At a charity gala, Minjun publicly announced a multi-million-dollar partnership with Nia's foundation. No conditions, no expectations, just support. When reporters asked why, his answer became national news, because she deserved to be believed long before she needed to prove herself. Across the room, Nia met his gaze, and this time, both smiled. Not as enemies, not as husband and wife, but as two people who had finally found peace. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Afro-Korean Diaries for more emotional billionaire romance dramas, powerful heroines, unforgettable love stories, and satisfying endings. Tell us in the comments, would you have given Minjun a second chance, or was Nia right to walk away?